Strength in silence is one of the greatest forms of wisdom, and Imam Ali, known for his unmatched intellect and spiritual depth, emphasized this truth throughout his life and teachings. Silence is not merely the absence of words, it is the presence of understanding. It is the state where the heart listens more than the tongue speaks, where thought matures before expression, and where wisdom takes root in the soil of patience and humility. Imam Ali once said, "The tongue is like a lion, if you let it loose it will wound someone." This simple yet profound statement captures a reality that most people overlook. Words once spoken cannot be taken back. They can heal, inspire, or destroy depending on how and when they are used. Silence therefore becomes a shield of the wise, a form of control that reflects strength rather than weakness. In a world where people compete to be heard, silence becomes a sign of those who understand the true value of words. Imam Ali's wisdom teaches that not every thought deserves expression and not every truth needs to be announced. The one who controls his speech controls his destiny. He also said, "Silence is the best reply to a fool." These words reveal that when faced with ignorance or provocation, silence is not a sign of defeat but a victory of wisdom over impulse. The silent person may appear passive, but inside he is powerful, thoughtful, and patient. He does not waste energy in arguments where understanding is impossible. His silence speaks louder than words because it is filled with self-control, awareness, and inner peace. Imam Ali lived in a time of deep political and social turbulence. His words and actions were constantly tested by the ignorance, arrogance, and betrayal of others. Yet he demonstrated the strength of silence in moments when speaking might have ignited greater chaos. He knew that words have power but silence has wisdom. He taught his followers that silence allows reflection and reflection brings clarity. When one pauses before speaking, one gains the ability to see beyond emotion and ego. This pause, this moment of stillness, separates the wise from the reckless. The person who speaks without thinking often regrets his words, while the one who thinks before speaking rarely does. Silence, according to Imam Ali, is also a form of worship. It is the state in which the soul draws nearer to the Creator, where the heart becomes a mirror reflecting divine truth. In silence, a believer listens to his conscience, hears his soul's whispers, and feels the guidance of God. Words can often cloud the heart with noise and distraction, but silence clears the way for spiritual connection. That is why Imam Ali often spent long hours in solitude, reflecting, praying, and engaging in deep contemplation. His silence was not emptiness but full of meaning, wisdom, and remembrance of God. Silence also builds character. It teaches patience, restraint, and humility. Imam Ali's life is a perfect example of how silence can be more powerful than speech. When he was wronged, he chose patience. When others provoked him, he chose wisdom. When people spoke ill of him, he remained calm, letting his actions speak louder than his words. His silence was not born of fear but of faith. It was rooted in his understanding that truth does not need noise to be powerful. A diamond shines even in darkness. Likewise, a truthful heart does not need to shout to be recognized. In his teachings, Imam Ali often linked silence with intellect. He said, "Wisdom is the fruit of silence. The one who talks too much seldom listens, and without listening, learning becomes impossible." Silence allows the mind to observe, to absorb, and to understand. In silence, one learns not only about others but also about oneself. Imam Ali's words remind us that real learning begins when we stop speaking and start reflecting. The wise person speaks only when his words are more valuable than his silence. Silence also plays a crucial role in relationships. Many conflicts arise not from what is done but from what is said. Harsh words can destroy years of love and trust. Imam Ali's approach to silence teaches us that in moments of anger or misunderstanding, silence protects both hearts. When tempers rise, silence is a sign of strength, not weakness. It allows time for emotions to cool and reason to return. The one who remains silent in anger preserves dignity, while the one who speaks recklessly loses it. Imam Ali's wisdom also extends to how silence interacts with knowledge. He said, "No word is good if it is not backed by action, and no silence is good if it conceals ignorance." This means that silence has value only when it comes from understanding. To remain silent out of fear or ignorance is not wisdom. True silence comes from knowing when to speak and when not to. The wise person remains silent when words are useless, but he speaks when truth must be defended. Thus, silence and speech are both tools of the intelligent, used with balance and purpose. Imam Ali's own silence during the early years after the Prophet's passing was an act of profound wisdom. Many misunderstood his calmness as passivity, but in truth it was a strategic and spiritual silence. He avoided conflict to preserve unity among Muslims, showing that sometimes silence can prevent greater harm. His restraint was an act of strength, not submission. Through silence he preserved the essence of faith and guided people through his example rather than his argument. In the modern world where constant communication dominates, Imam Ali's message is more relevant than ever. Today people speak before thinking, post before reflecting, and argue before understanding. The wisdom of silence is lost amid the noise of opinions and debates. Imam Ali's teachings remind us that silence is not emptiness, it is focus. It is a conscious act of choosing peace over chaos, wisdom over ego, and reflection over reaction. If more people practiced silence with understanding, there would be less conflict, less regret, and more harmony in both personal and social life. Silence also helps in developing empathy. When we stop speaking and start listening, we understand others better. Imam Ali taught that the heart that listens grows in mercy and wisdom. He said a man is hidden under his tongue. This means that a person's character is revealed by his speech. When someone speaks carelessly, his inner flaws become visible. But the one who speaks with wisdom or remains silent when needed reveals the purity of his heart and the depth of his intellect. Imam Ali's silence was never empty. It was filled with the remembrance of God, with patience, with deep insight into the nature of humanity. His silence was a teacher. It showed that not every battle requires words and not every truth needs to be shouted. Sometimes silence transforms hearts more effectively than speech. The Prophet Muhammad himself often remained silent in moments of deep thought or compassion, and Imam Ali followed this prophetic model. His silence was an inheritance of prophetic wisdom, a continuation of divine guidance through restraint and reflection. There is also a profound connection between silence and self-discipline. The one who can control his tongue can control his desires. Imam Ali said that silence protects a person from sin. Many sins arise from the misuse of the tongue: lying, gossip, insult, arrogance. Silence saves one from these traps. It builds the fortress of self-control around the heart. When a person guards his speech, he guards his soul. This is why Imam Ali emphasized that silence is among the best forms of worship, because it requires vigilance, awareness, and humility. Furthermore, silence nurtures inner peace. The one who practices silence learns to enjoy solitude. He no longer seeks validation through words. He becomes comfortable with his own company and thoughts. Imam Ali's silence reflected his contentment with God's decree. He did not seek to prove himself through arguments or speeches. His character, his actions, and his wisdom were enough. True strength lies in such contentment, in knowing that one's worth does not depend on being heard but on being true. When silence becomes part of one's nature, wisdom follows naturally. Imam Ali's students and companions often observed his moments of deep silence, followed by short, powerful sentences that carried immense meaning. His words had weight because they were born from reflection. He spoke only when necessary, and his speech had the clarity of truth. This pattern of thoughtful silence followed by wise speech became a mark of his greatness. In essence, the strength in silence is the strength of the heart over the tongue, the strength of wisdom over impulse, and the strength of faith over pride. Imam Ali's life teaches that silence is not escape from responsibility, it is a way to fulfill it wisely. It is not silence out of weakness, but silence full of power. It is the calmness of a heart that trusts in God and knows that time reveals all truths. Even in his final words, Imam Ali reflected wisdom and restraint. When he was struck by the sword, he said, "By the Lord of the Kaaba, I have succeeded." There was no cry of revenge, no words of anger, only acceptance, peace, and submission. That is the ultimate form of strength in silence. His silence at that moment echoed louder than any speech. It became a lesson for generations to come that silence rooted in faith is the most powerful voice of all. Through Imam Ali's wisdom, we learn that silence is not simply keeping quiet, it is a discipline of the soul, a means to grow closer to God, and a sign of deep understanding. In a world full of noise, those who master silence hold the key to true peace and knowledge. The strength in silence is eternal, and those who live by it become reflections of divine wisdom, just as Imam Ali was a man whose silence spoke to hearts across centuries, teaching that true power lies not in words but in the calm and knowing heart.